Okay.
Courtney?
Well, first of all, let's introduce Courtney Tony, who is the brains behind all of National Music Equality. She got the ball rolling. And Courtney, tell us about NME.
Yes, thank you, Beverly, and thank you to everyone who is tuned in tonight. We are honored to have you all here for this crucial and incredibly important conversation. As Beverly said, we've just, as far as our organization and just kind of explaining a little bit about us, first of all, there are several, all of our board members are on here. So if you guys don't mind, just cut your cameras on and give a little wave to our viewers tonight. We are honored to have each and every one of our NME board members here. As far as Nashville Music Equality, our mission is to create an anti-racist environment in the Nashville music industry by providing conversation, education, mentorship, and resources for the music community. For those of you who do not know, we started out of the necessity of Blackout Tuesday, the show must be paused, because there was a void there that we needed to have an action behind the messaging. And from there, we have been able to have some really incredible panels throughout 2020. And now that we are in 2021 in Black History Month, we are forging the path to have even more incredible and thought-provoking conversations. So again, we are honored to have each and every one of you here. I'll put in some links in the chat tonight for you guys if you like to donate or just want to learn more about us. But right now, I would love to hand the reins over to two of our board members who will be moderating this evening. I would like to introduce first and foremost, the Dean of MTSU College of Media and Entertainment, Beverly Keel, and the founder of Creatives Day, Mr. Brian Sexton. Take it away, guys.
All right, so I am really excited to introduce our special guest today. And then we'll talk a little bit about what tonight's going to be about. First, we have Sheryl Oliver, who is co-founder and co-executive director of the Equity Alliance. Guinn, president of the Nashville chapter of the NAACP. And we have two people from the YWCA in Nashville. We have Sharon Roberson, who's the president and CEO of YWCA Nashville, and Shane Foster, who's the executive director of Amend Together and vice president of external affairs for the YWCA in Nashville. And they are experts at our topic. So as many of you know, we had announced the panel with the board members before last week. And after the events of last week, we decided we needed to pivot. And so this is going to be a very interesting conversation. And we will take questions. So please put those in the chat box. And we're just going to dive right on in. I'm going to direct this first question at Shannon Sanders, who is now a big shot at BMI. He is also chairman of the Nashville Music Equality. And then after Shannon answers, anybody else can jump in. So Shannon, it has been quite a week. Nashville has made lots of headlines following the Morgan Wallen incident. And everybody's weighing in privately. There is a fear, of course, of speaking out publicly. Some people are saying, this isn't who we are. And others are saying, yes, it is. And some want to jump in and sort of do damage control to make the country music industry look better. Others are saying, no, this is a time we've got to fix the problem. So my question is a two-parter. Was this a day of reckoning for the Nashville music industry? And part two is, now what? What do we do now? Where do we go from here?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Beverly, and really excited to be here. Really excited about our talk and to hear from our esteemed panelists tonight and to join our very esteemed board members as well. You know what, Beverly, honestly, more than a day of reckoning, I think it's a day of awakening. I think that Nashville is awakening, and as it awakens, it's it's taking a look in the mirror and sees sleep in its eyes and realizes that because of the sleep in its eyes, it hasn't been able to see some real issues that has been in front of it the whole time. And I think that Nashville is just realizing itself more than anything, and it is not necessarily liking what it sees. And so I think that where a year ago we may have been a talk like this, we were talking about what we could argue is systematic oppression, if you will, or not even oppression, but just systematic circumstances, if you will. I think now that we can speak to systematic progress, however incremental. But I think that this response says, hey, we recognize this as wrong and offensive to a whole group of people, and let us stop, let us in some way respond to this and just say that we're not in favor or in support of what had taken place. And then the other part of that, in terms, now what? Where do we go from here? I think that we just continue to address things as they arise. I mean, let's not, we definitely can't be naive and think that it won't happen again in some form. So what we must do is continue to raise our standards and continue to raise the level of conversation and the intensity of these conversations. It's okay in our workplaces and wherever we are. I think we just continue to address these things as they come up, and continue to have the tough talks as they come up. I felt like I had one today with the coworker that just asked me, and I was so glad that I was just asked something. And I had an opportunity to simply answer a question that a coworker was finally comfortable enough to ask me. So in that way, I was honored just to be available to be able to answer somebody's question at the point that they were ready to hear my answer. So I think that that's where we are, Bill.
Yeah.
Tracy Gershon?
Yeah. I mean, when you ask about a day of reckoning, yeah, I think it is. But I think more important is, I think we have to ask ourselves, all of us, are we willing to do the work that's required? Because this is not a one, we have a lot of work to do. What do we want to see ourselves? How do we want to look as a community? And are we willing to do the work? Because this is years and years and years and years of stuff. And I think that's the thing. It's not just, it's okay to post and all that, but what work are we going to do? What, and to Shannon's point, what conversations are we okay to have now? But there's a lot of work, and we just have to ask ourselves, are we willing to do it?
I think that one of the things that you will have to do is be honest with yourself. And I'm talking to the people who are white on this call.
Mm-hmm.
It says something like this, and let's say he's your money maker. He's somebody money for you. And he says something that's along these lines, and you heard it, and everyone's kind of joking. It's a jovial, fun experience. Would you step into that space and call it out? If none of these Black people had heard it, nobody Black was around, would you step into that space and say that's unacceptable? Because that's what we ask young boys to do in our Men Together program. We tell young men to step into that space and make your friends and hold them accountable. Would you do that? If you're honest with yourself, that's the difficult rub. That's the rub when you are out there without the world looking at you. What kind of person are you at that point? That's the issue.
Well, let me pivot here to the panel, right? I follow, we follow all of your organizations, and you all do some amazing work. Why do you think Nashville is so forgiving when it comes to racism? And that's for anyone. When it like anyone can jump in there and take that question.
I'm going to say something, but I don't want the conversation. This is something I've said over and over, because we do domestic violence work. And I understand domestic violence, sexual assault work. When we do that work, we say you need to believe the victim. They've been traumatized. They wouldn't make this up. But when it comes to racism, and all the people of color on this screen have been traumatized, and women have been traumatized too because of discrimination. But we do not believe the victim. We do the old school way that we used to treat women way back. Well, are you sure he meant that? You're too sensitive. Why are you bringing that up now? Let's just let it go. If you want to move up, we make all those excuses. But if we treated racism like we do sexual assault and domestic violence, we can move this needle forward.
some points.
Well-
and look, let's be real. And I've said this before. If we treated racism like the coronavirus, if we made people stay home, and watch content and take the medicine and really dig as deep as we have to try to eradicate coronavirus and bring everybody's awareness to it worldwide. I'm in Australia right now having this conversation, and it's the same thing. So it's more than us. That's a different conversation. But I just want to add on to what you were saying, because that's the point. But if we treated it like the coronavirus, we'd make progress.
Sharon, I have a question on this topic specifically, which is, and I'm sorry, Brian and Beverly, I'm totally jumping in, but I think that we, in a lot of these conversations that those of us that are white and trying to do this work are having, we couch things, we protect the language, we do a lot of things that aren't as bold as they probably need to be. And I'm wondering, sometimes it's overwhelming, because the answer on why Nashville is so forgiving is because this industry, this town, this country is built off of white supremacy. And until we sort of address that as like the fundamental issue here, none of the rest of this matters. It's great to have a moment in time where there's one word that can solidify a bunch of people to take action. But how do we start working towards really thinking about in our daily lives how we address the white supremacy issue?
Well, I mean, the issue is there, but I always say, maybe because when I was in college, I was an economics major, and that was the most enlightening experience of my life, because I think the undercurrent to all of this is the economics. And even slavery was an economic issue. They tried to trick it and made it easier because you could degrade a group of people. But at the end of the day, you got free labor. Just think of if you ran your organization, didn't have to pay anyone. That's a moneymaker. And it's all about the economics. And that's where the rub comes in. I spent 30 years in corporate America, corporate lawyer. And at the end of the day, where I saw racism move forward and remain a part of a structure is when the status quo was making money for an organization. That's why I always say, where will you be if you are someone that's a really, really high performer, that's really making money for your organization? Are you as willing to hold them accountable as you are for this low-hanging fruit? Someone that's just out there that says one word. There are so many people that never say that word. They're doing more damage than Morgan Wallen.
Sheryl or Charlene, do y'all want to jump in before we move on, or Shane?
You know what? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
But really quickly, just to Sharon's point too, and just to make it plain as far as what tonight is, it's not a Morgan Wallen witch hunt. Like, just be clear about that. That's not what this is.
Oh, most definitely.
It's just something, it's conversation, and it's healthy. And these are the things that we need to talk about in response to these things. So as Shane comes in, I just want to salute everybody for just being willing to even come and be brave enough to even come and have a conversation like this in the wake of these events. So
yeah, and before you move from that, when I brought up his name, I'm actually in favor of doing more investigation, having more conversation with him specifically. And Shane, if I've actually done this in a circumstance not involving race, but involving sexual harassment and domestic violence, that is. So no, it's not, because it's not about that. That's too simple. That's just too simple.
too easy. You're absolutely right, Shan.
One of the things that I just wanted to add here is when we talk about the work that needs to be done, right? It goes far beyond attaching consequence to behavior, right? We got to get to a place where we're able to truly impact the circles of influence that we're in. We got to be having these conversations while Black people are present, but also when they're not. We got to have these conversations at home to make sure that we're raising a generation of young people who do not act off of hate, right? Hate is something that is taught. So in spaces where this conversation comes up, whether it's in the news, the media, music, whatever the case may be, that's a teachable moment. But then also taking it into our boardrooms and into the decision-making rooms where we're talking about hiring practices, right? And are we willing to step up in those moments where resumes are being tossed to the side for things that could be classified as racism? Are we stepping up in those moments when we have opportunities to promote individuals and we're doing it based off of of bias or based off of friendship or a relationship? Do we have an upward mobility plan for every position across the board so that we're transparent about how we're doing work in the workplace, right? When we start talking about really a day of reckoning or a day of awakening, that will happen when we're able to start having that deeper conversation. And as Sharon was saying, starting to truly impact the economics of this, where individuals are able to really overcome the wrongs that have been done in the past.
Well, to that point, and this is for anyone on the panel, how do you begin to build a real model for racial inclusion? Or does such model exist? Is it out there? What are you doing on the ground? You know, we had such a turbulent year, 2020, and Charlene, I commend you for what the Equity Alliance is doing to protect my voting rights and the voting rights of my children. What are you seeing from where we are and where we should be in regards to a model where people can start to have real dialogue to move the needle forward? Or are we simply not there yet?
I don't know. I have to echo a lot of what Shane said, and I somewhat cringe and laugh a little bit that if what's his name, Morgan Wallen,
yeah,
is the moment of reckoning that this industry is having, I seriously question how far we have to come. We got a long way to go. Were you not paying attention all 2020? Were you not paying attention when George Floyd had a foot on his neck for 8 minutes? You said nothing? Then was that not enough? So I really question, are we doing this for performance, or are we really trying to actually solve systemic racism? Because the music industry is probably one of the most critical strongholds that we have of white supremacy. If you want to look at how the music industry mirrors chattel slavery, it does, and how we rape and pillage Black artists of their talent, their creativity, their intellectual property for profit, and they don't get anything for that. They get pennies on the dollar. So we need, again, what Shane and Miss Sharon said is we need to talk about the economics. I don't know if there's a model for it, but this is not hard, y'all. We need to start having the conversations, and it don't start with the Black people on this call. Black folks didn't create racism, and we are not going to be the ones to solve it. So it's going to start with white folks having conversations, as I like to say. Talk to your cousins. Talk to the folks who are texting you memes of blackface. Talk to folks who are texting you little snide comments about Black people. Call that shit out. Like, that's the conversations y'all need to have, not this panel. Like, we're not gonna solve racism with panels. And I excuse the disgust in my voice. I'm just sick and tired of having these same conversations. The solving is gonna happen when we solve the economics of this, when we pay the reparations for our people.
We have a lot of questions, so let me jump in with the next one. Why is it okay for other cultures to use the N-word? And what is the danger of giving Morgan a free pass and saying that he doesn't deserve consequences?
And that is for anybody. Anyone want to take that?
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at the content, and I'm one of the probably, I don't know how many people, I'm sure everyone has behind their back, but I've been called nigga to my face. I mean, I grew up, I'm a little old, that's why she called me Miss Sharon. You can tell you're old when they call you Miss Sharon, but I'm old. I was in a classroom in the 5th grade at a newly integrated school where a teacher didn't call on me the full year. I was a nigga in the play yard, and I could just say it. I was called all of these names. So to me, it's a very harsh term. I understand all day how people have tried to soothe a lot of their pain by bringing that word into their vernacular. And I'm not going to criticize anyone for what they have to do to survive, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of post-traumatic stress syndrome that comes with being Black in America that no one wants to address. We address it all day with domestic violence victims. We address it all day with rape victims. But when it comes to Black folks, people do not understand the burden that we carry, that I carry as a person that's been able to move on through this society and been successful despite the trauma that I suffered at a very young age. So with that said, I do have conflicting emotions, because it was such a hard word for me, and it was so ingrained in me that with the negativity of the term, that it's hard for me to totally accept anyone saying it. But with that said, in any given situation, I'm in a ball game, you know, and someone just says it, you know, and really as a term of endearment, I let it go. I don't criticize. I don't call it out, because I do understand. So it's kind of with mixed emotions. I really see it. But as for me, I don't want it to pass any white person's lips. I just can't do it. I just cannot do it. I just cannot do it. If you're singing a song, you just shut up during that time. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I just can't.
I think we all know on this call that saying the N-word is wrong. We all know it. That's not the issue that I think we're tackling. I question how is, and I watched the video, I watched the TMZ video, and I question how is it okay that Morgan Wallen feels so okay, and he's been so insulated that he feels it's okay to say it. What we don't often talk about is we want to respond to sort of the overt racism and the N-word. We see when folks make a slip up, folks' contracts get ended, they get canceled, and all of that, the cancel culture happens. But we never address, we turn a blind eye to the covert racism that we are dealing with every single day in your workplaces, in our boardrooms, everywhere in our community. And so that is the real battle that we're fighting and we're trying to address. It's not that he said the N-word, it's the environment that what was created for him, that was allowed for him to say it in the first place. That is the problem. It's the people around him that we have to address that are complicit in that.
In the work that we've been doing to end violence against women and girls, and particularly engaging men to do so, as Sharon mentioned, a huge tenet of that is us holding the people around us accountable. Mm-hmm. And as I watched that video, what was astonishing to me is the other people, not only those who were walking around him, who was walking inside, who was in the car, but we live in a space right now where it's easier for us to turn on a camera than to call out the bad behavior, right? It's easier for us to do that. So we got to be in a place where right now it's not just acceptable to say, I'm not racist. We need to transition to a place of being anti-racist. Right? I wrote a book called What Hurt Didn't Hinder, and it told my entire life story. And one of the things I talked about was racism that I experienced in the workplace by someone who raised their hand and told me to my face and in front of my peers, I'm your ally. But when there was a moment of time for her to show up as my ally, she didn't do so. And in fact, it was more harm being caused, right? But to that extent, as a Black person, I have roots that extend so far that I have resilience that comes up on top of that I'm still able to achieve. But it's up to my white counterparts to stand up to say, that's not acceptable, right? To say that this cannot happen anymore, any longer. And not only are we going to call out the behavior, but we're going to do the work to ensure that no one else gets called these names, that these words are not being used, that these microaggressions stop, and that people are held accountable for holding others accountable. Where is this showing up in our performance reviews as it relates to our corporate culture, right? Where are we holding people accountable to that extent as well?
Shane, I'll tell you sort of an eye-opening moment I had this week. There was a reference to oh, we're the good white people. And I would assume that everybody who's participating, all nearly 300, we all think that we're the good white people, that we want to do, that we want to do well. But I want to change that. I'm not a good white person. I want to become a good white person. So I've got a lot of work to do. Because I think in the white community, we always assume the problem is with others, not ourselves. Right? So it's the extreme racist, it's like what happened last week. But if we all assume we're not the good guys, let's work from there. Let's work from, we're part of the problem. How do we become part of the solution?
Yeah, I think Charlene, and this Tracy bumped in. Thanks for saying that, Beverly. I think that when we even started NAE, all of us, I thought I was the most evolved anti-racist. Coming to find that I'm part of that. I never have to think about being white. Whoever has to think about being white? Not even, I'm reading a book now by my friend Molly, The White Privilege Pop Quiz. And I thought, well, I'm learning so much about myself and I'm trying to evolve. And what's great about an organization like this is I feel like not even a safe space, a brave space to ask questions. But until we look at ourselves, the people, not the non-white, the white people, it starts with us. And we can like I said, these panels are great, but I go back to doing the work and figuring out what work it is to be done. And it's hard because I always feel like now I'm still a little gun shy of, am I going to say the wrong thing? I'm a little protected right now. Even though I have these, I call my brothers and sisters on the NME, I'm still a little bit scared because the more I learn, the more scared I get that I'm going to say the wrong thing and do the right thing. And I'm trying to just put it out there and say, you're right. I got work to do on myself. Even though I'm part of this organization, I got to keep going.
Shane, let me jump in, follow what Tracy just said to something we discussed, which was leaders are now afraid. And as you said, fear is never a good management philosophy or position. So talk about what a leadership of an organization must do to start building a culture of real racial inclusion.
Well, I think the basis for that comment, as I've literally traveled across the country doing work with executives around some of these issues, and that fear is very real, but it's based on false narratives. And it's also based on a lack of understanding of what's acceptable and what's not. We're because of this fear, we don't want to do the training. We're scared that somebody might say something that offends someone. We're scared that we're going to say something and be blamed as being racist or whatever the case may be. But because we're not doing the training, because we're not articulating what is and what is not microaggressions, what's acceptable and not acceptable behavior in the workplace. At the end of the day, as Sharon always says, we got to look at our mission and our vision, right? When we look at our mission and our vision, if we're operating within that, none of these other things come up. It's when we step outside of those things that we get in trouble, right? And so we gotta pull off the gloves and really sit down and really talk and train people. And it's the same thing as it relates to sexual harassment. So many men don't even know what sexual harassment is. And so they go around operating in a way because nobody's ever corrected that bad behavior. I still run into executives who grew up in neighborhoods and in communities where there were not a whole lot of Black people. And they tell me all the time, I've been living my life. When I talk about my friends that are Black, I say, that's my Black friend, right? Well, nobody's ever stopped and corrected. Why I just can't be your boy? Why I just can't be your friend, right? But if we're never correcting individuals, then nobody ever has the opportunity to learn. In a corporate space, most of the time, one of the first things to get cut off a budget is our trainings, is our professional development. And so there's a lot of ignorance in terms of what is acceptable and what's not. We have to commit to doing that work. That is the thing that's going to take away this fear and be able to sit down and talk to each other. One of the videos I often use is with Golden Girls, and Don Cheadle is in that video. And what he talks about at the end of that video is we got to start making positive assumptions when we see each other, but we can't make positive assumptions when we're disconnected, right? We got to start sitting down and breaking bread with each other, having difficult conversations on panels, but also at home, especially right now. You can do this easily by Zoom, right? We need to be more connected. It's difficult to see value where you don't have relationship. That's the biggest part of this issue as it relates to racism.
And if I can jump in, I want to hear from Sheryl. Sheryl, I know you're doing a lot of work on the ground. Talk to us about some of the efforts that you're doing in regards to what we're talking about now with your organization.
So, of course, I've been listening intently to what everyone has been saying, and there are quite a few things that I'm taking away. One thing that has really hit home, of course, is the conversation that Shane was talking about that doesn't happen at the workplace. So when you have that, so for example, of course, we have seen the several conversations about sexual harassment, and they have spent money on top of money on top of money regarding the things regarding sexual harassment. But I don't see those same things when they talk about racism. Now, and then what ends up happening, or even what I have seen that has happened, and I may not be in the field that Shane is in, but what I have seen that has happened is that at some point it becomes too difficult, because justifications are made for things that are said, just like the N-word justifications have been made. What context was it used in? Who was he speaking to when he said it? Well, the rappers do it, so why can't we? So when you get those types of justifications that really don't make any sense, but you make them make sense because you have a sense of entitlement, or it's your position that it's something that you should be able to do just because you choose to, then that's where companies, I think, sometimes pull back, and then they stop having that conversation, and then we don't get anywhere. So they would much rather settle a racial case than they would a sexual harassment case. And that's just what I've seen legally. They would much rather do that. And and sometimes in a lot of instances, racism is a lot harder to prove than sexual harassment is to prove. And because it's so much harder to prove, they're more than willing to make that gamble and settle those cases, or throw money at that situation, than to fix the real problem, which is there, and actually have those difficult conversations. Now, what do we do as far as how do we hold corporations, or how do we hold people accountable for these things? And I think that's what the whole panel here has been about, is how do we get from a point of a Mr. Wallen or anyone, well, I mean, from what I've heard from, is it Mickey Guinn? It's rampant throughout the industry anyway. So we could pick and choose whoever we wanted to ask about this, really. We don't have to it doesn't have to be Morgan Wallen. Apparently it can be anyone within the industry, from the way that it has been depicted. And because of that, I think that starting from the head, all of those corporate executives that have made that money that Charlene was talking about earlier, how they have made that money off of those artists, those are the ones that we need to come to the table and to say, look, this is how we're going to change the conversation throughout country music. This is how we're going to eradicate hate throughout country music. They have the money and they have the influence. Make them use it for something that actually counts.
Yeah, I saw where I was reading an article that Morgan Wallen's album sales actually skyrocketed after this.
Hurt my feelings.
Hurt my feelings. How shameful. So I hope whoever is his manager, whoever is his label, Big Loud, I think you're on the call, is directing him to donate those sales that he's made after February 2nd to Black-led organizations like NAACP, like the Equity Alliance, because he didn't get those album sales on his own. He profited because of something that happened in the media. So that is the work that needs to be done. Like, that's not your money, unfortunately. If he really is remorseful, I hope that he donates those sales to a charitable cause.
I've got one question, Charlene. Is that something that we should accept? I'm literally asking the question because I do not know the answer. It is not to put, and let me take that heat off of Charlene and put it to everyone, because I honestly do not know the answer to the question.
What do you mean?
Is that money that we should accept?
I think you should. There's something to be said for taking good money from bad people. I'm just going to tell you, if you are running any organization that's a nonprofit in the United States of America, every dime you get has a story behind it. Trust me. Every dime you get has a story behind it. What you have to do is make sure when you take that money, you use that money to put your mission to really affect change within maybe some of those organizations that gave you the money that are not good. Now, I've turned down money too, though. Don't get me wrong. Some people just got to divide. You just say, no, Shane knows what I'm talking about. And there's been some hard dollars to give up. But with that said, you have to use your platform to really change their minds. Because all this money, it's almost like they've laundered it. All these big foundations are so charitable. It's like the money has been laundered to become something beautiful, to do beautiful things. So you really have to take it the way it comes to you. I do believe, and maybe it's because, I was brought up like, a lot of you were, to really believe in redemption. And even I would pray for Morgan Wallen. I would pray for him to be redeemed, because I do believe in inviting people to the table, talking things, going through these issues, and really hoping they come out the other end a better person. What is he, a 27-year-old man? That's a baby. My youngest child's older than that, so that's a baby. And so I would hope that his brain would be in a place that we could talk about it and he could truly understand, because if I didn't believe in forgiveness, I couldn't even be on this panel tonight. So you have to be able to have that in your heart and really to come to the table and say, you got to do better. This is unacceptable, but where do we go from here? And with this issue on fear of executives wanting to hire people, I could write a book about that. How many times have I heard people say, well, if we hire this person, it's going to be potential trouble down the road, as if every Black person that you hire is going to turn into a lawsuit. If you stick to the mission of your organization, look at the actual mission statement of whatever organization you're a part of. You stick to that. You won't have to worry about this, because nowhere in that mission statement is going to say you discriminate against someone based on the color of their skin. Nowhere in the mission statement is going to say you sexually harass people. If you stick to they have grand mission statements. I've told many executives this, Shane, I always pull this out. Look at your mission statement. You stick to that, and you won't have to worry about whether you're afraid to hire a certain type of person. That's ridiculous.
All right, I'll jump in with a question from one of our viewers. How do we as an industry respond when we're seeing some of our peers want to sweep in with love and forgiveness before true discussion has taken place? Where do we start when a redemption narrative has already started before education?
Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, with when it comes to being anti-racist, there are steps. There are actual, almost like a 12-step program for an alcoholic, an addict. There are steps you have to take, and the first one is acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge the harm that was done. That's with not just Morgan Wallen, with anyone, is you got to tell the truth. Truth will set you free. So there cannot be forgiveness and redemption without telling the truth first. So I don't know how you get to do that. That's what a privilege. So no, he needs to do that first, and then seek to understand. Seek to understand next. That's all I got.
I have gotten a lot of backlash about inviting him for a conversation. And that was based upon, I think, people's position that I was offering the forgiveness before that I was offering forgiveness. That the statements that were made were intentional. They were showing us he was doing nothing more than just showing us who he was. And that when you're offering to speak to someone about that, then that is basically offering forgiveness. Offering to educate him on anything was considered a very passive move on my part. And I don't see it that way. Having the conversation is definitely not about, and I think that's something that people, I don't know, because I feel like that at this point in time, people have gotten fed up with everything. I think with the past 4 years, I think that the insurrection that happened on January the 6th really took everything over the tipping point as far as race relations are concerned. And I think that that's something that we need to absolutely address. It's when you see something displayed in that manner, that like the insurrection that happened on January the 6th, and then we just go forward with our normal days where these people were able to reboard planes, they were not put on a no-fly list, where these people were not arrested right on site, they weren't shot with rubber bullets, they weren't tear gassed, you know, they were able, there was a report that I heard from an officer that was there during the insurrection, one of the Capitol officers. He said he got separated from his group of officers and the crowd took him and said, get his gun, let's shoot him with his own gun. Now this is happening at the Capitol. Still, these people are able to fly home, no rubber bullets shot at them, no tear gas, no arrests until much later. Then to add insult to injury, there is a man who was part of the insurrection who says, well, I can't eat the food that y'all serve me. I need organic food. And he actually gets it. He actually gets to get moved to another facility and receives organic food. Now, I have never in my life heard of anything close to that. Not even close, let alone something of that magnitude. So we hear that, but then we're still expected to continue to go forward with our daily lives. That's going back to what Sharon was talking about of that, I call it post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what I call it, because that's what it feels like. When you are suffering trauma like that, where people are actively telling you through their actions that they don't give a curse about you, that what you stand, that the person that you are means absolutely nothing to them, and you have to keep going on day by day by day, then yes, I do understand why people's positions were, no, we don't need to talk to him about anything. He has every resource imaginable available to at his fingertips. There's nothing we need to do to address that with him or anyone else. We just need to keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting. I understand that sentiment, but I also understand that if we are not having the conversation, the people who are doing the wrong are still making those justifications for doing the wrong. They are continuing to do the wrong. And there are some people who honestly do not know what the wrong is. They don't. I'm not saying about the N-word. We know the N-word is absolutely wrong. But those are the things that we were talking about that Shan was referring to when we're talking about corporate America, when things are not as bold as the N-word, but they are those smaller microaggressions that are happening, or even maybe not microaggressions, but things that have become the system of that particular company or that particular corporation, something that has become the normal part of their system. When we see that those things that we are expected to live with those things day after day after day, I understand why people don't want me to have the conversation or think that the conversation is a passive move. But firmly, and I think most of us here on the panel are in agreement, the conversation has to be had to be able to move forward. But no, I'm in agreement with Charlene. You cannot have the forgiveness without doing the work.
And I would actually, I compliment you, because I would be very much in favor of you having a conversation. Is for this reason. I always like to set up structure so I can refer back to things. And I fight every day for our young, Black kids in our schools to be given redemption and forgiveness and second chances. So if you kind of operate on that basis, you can say, well, they did this for him, let's do this for our people, because you never know down the road. And I do believe that people can be redeemed, but you have to start, they have to say they're wrong, dead wrong. You have to start, like you said, Charlene, it's like a 12-step program. And I would like to see if he is sincere, or anyone is sincere in what they've done wrong, because there's some merit in that, and maybe he can be the spokesperson to people in his community. There's nothing like an addict that can help other addicts. There's nothing like it. They can tell you the story, they can explain it to you, they can turn your life around, say, I've been where you are, but I've learned to do better. And that's effective, very effective.
Well, with us being kind of quarantine and our safe spaces or whatnot, 2022, hopefully the world opens back up. And so again, I think someone mentioned at some point you have to go from panel discussions and talk to action and real models and things that are creating impact in the community. To my panel, do you all know of anything, any resources out there, anything that you see as being effective in regards to creating, again, an environment where we're starting to move from just talk to action, or what's missing on the ground? What are you seeing?
I get triggered by this question, Brian.
Uh-oh.
It is not my job to educate white folks. I'm sorry. It's not my job to. Google is a great resource. I have to operate for 38 years in a white dominated world, and I figured it out. Like, it is not my job to tell you this. There are so many resources, books, podcasts, articles, you name it, out there on doing the work. But I will tell you, know your history. Black people know your history better than yours. We are living in a world where there are some dual realities going on right now. The world, the America that we actually are living in, and then the America, this facade that we have created that we are great. We are not. This country was built on economic exploitation of Black bodies. And until we admit that and understand how everything we do and function in all these systems go all the way back to that, we're not going to get anywhere. So understand and know your history. One of the greatest resources right now is the 1619 Project. Read that. There's a podcast to it too. Listen to episode 3 of the 1619 podcast. It speaks specifically to the music that Black people have influenced the music that we listen to. So that's a great place to start, and how country music got its origins in Black ancestry, African ancestry. So when we want to talk about our cultural currency being exploited, it's the country music industry. It's predominantly white now. So I just recommend that, one, start with the 1619 podcast. There are books out there, great resources like How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibrahim Kendi is a great another book. The New Jim Crow by, oh Lord, I'm gonna draw a blank, but I can send you some resources, some books. But again, still not my job to do that, but Google is a great tool.
Let's move on to the next question. Did Nashville do the right thing by refusing to play his music videos? I know the ACMs took a bold step by saying that he was now not eligible to be nominated for an award. Of course, some now position that is Morgan being the victim. We see memes that say, "I stand with Morgan Wallen." His sales have gone back up. So was there a better response that could have created change? I know some people thought that the Nashville Music Industry didn't have a choice because it was so flagrant and it was captured on video for the world to see. Was there a better response? Was that the best response, or was there one that could have created change better?
I think what I would really like to see from Nashville and other communities is the responsibility to the things that happen that don't get caught on camera. That's what's happening. I hear from people all the time that, if we could just go back to the time when, things were just so much better and we treated people with respect. And the reality is that doesn't exist. Not for people of color. That doesn't exist here, right? What's happening now is because of cell phones and cameras, we're exposed to things that are happening in places where we currently are not, right? I heard Shannon talking about he's in Australia right now. I'm in Memphis, like we're able to have connection to things in different places now than we had before. And so what I would love to see happen is a commitment that we're going to change this culture one office space at a time. where this is not going to be acceptable, period. I don't care how high performing you are. If you can't get on board with treating people with dignity and respect, you don't belong here. That is what's going to create the kind of change after this kind of moment that's going to be sustainable, because moments are going to come. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to do things that we're going to want to distance ourselves from. But the reality is, this too is America. We want to distance ourselves every time somebody does something that is against the social, politically correct status. This too is America, until we make a decision that this can no longer be America.
We have another question from the chat box. I'm going to read it. A lot of people in the country music industry and other genres make the excuse that the audience in country music doesn't want more diverse talent, whether that be Black country artists or playing female artists on the radio. They blame it on this enigma idea of taste and kind of pass the buck onto the market. Some powerful people are even quite sincere in their assertion that they believe their hands are tied. This person's question is, how do you counter these kinds of arguments and deflections so people can see a way to move forward and their industry can move forward as well? Anyone want to take that? Shannon, I know you.
Yeah.
Well,
Let me jump on that a little bit. You know, I told somebody today that, and I've said it often. Matter of fact, I've said it on our panels before. I have told very high level executives of the music business, of the country music industry, that one of the greatest mistakes the country music industry makes is not marketing to Black people. Why? You see all the money we spend. You see all the money we spend. And that's the thing. It's like when you really consider that dollar, you know, and I actually said, I know I said it on one of our panels, because I was talking about once I was in the Caribbean and couldn't believe how much country music I was hearing in the Caribbean, and realizing that Black people in the Caribbean love country music because that's all they got on shortwave radio for a long time over there. So, you know, they love Marvin, they love Kenny Rogers as much as they love Marvin Gaye over there. You know what I mean? And so it's knowing and understanding the power of that dollar. See, it all comes down, and that's what Sharon said earlier too. You know, that's one thing that Dr. King said before he passed, is that he realized, and this is something that the Native Americans did, which was they realized the importance of an economic reckoning, if you will, more than a social acceptance. They wanted the economic part of that, not the social part of that. They weren't worried about going to school. They weren't worried about radio stations. They weren't worried about these things. Give us the money, give us the land, and we'll do our thing. And so that's the thing. And I think that for a long time we've been talking about acceptance. But let's go back to the dollar. We are where we are, and what we're seeing is a bubbling. What we're feeling is a bubbling of Black artistry in country music, and it's always been. It's always been, to Charlie's point, it's always been. But we're realizing, I had an artist call me the other day and said, man, you know what? And he's an R&B artist. He told me, man, I've always wanted to do country music. It's only now that this conversation is happening. I've always wanted to do country music. I just don't know how. I just can't find the front door. And that's what it's always been. And so I think it's a beautiful moment, actually, because even if we just take it to the economics of it all, excuse me, that's it. If we just take it to the economics of it all, there's a lot of money to be made. You know, you have a lot of Black people that want to participate in the country music experience. And why? Because we realize that a lot of it is ours. It started with us. There's a certain thing about it that resonates with us on a roots level of the music. And so there's a great opportunity here. And this is the real conversation that we should be having with the country music industry, is how massive of an opportunity we have right now.
But I think if the audience of color saw more artists of color, there's that too. I mean, we've, even for women, you like and appreciate what you hear and see, you know, and so that's what we got to start on the top, by getting more artists of color and women, because again, an audience just, they like what they can see and hear. And they're not seeing and hearing enough women and people of color.
Well, let's be real. People want to see themselves reflected in whatever it is.
Right.
You know, if it's the country music industry, and I've told you guys before, we had a conversation with a guy one time, and he told me the last country music record he bought, he said, Arsenio Hall, he had Trisha Yearwood on Arsenio Hall. and you guys know how long it's been since Arsenio was on the air. Had Trisha Yearwood on Arsenio Hall. And he said, look, I didn't know nothing about Trisha Yearwood. He said, Trisha, and listen, I love Trisha. Trisha smashes. Trisha is a singer, you know, like for real, like for whatever genre. Trisha is soulful in the same way Patsy Cline was. She's a soulful country singer, real talk. And so he said, man, she smashed on Arsenio. She smashed. He said, I went and bought the tape the next day at Tower Old School, Tower Records. Shout out to Tower Records on West End.
Old school tape.
I know.
If you're real deal, you know. But he said he went and bought the tape. He said, man, I played that tape until it popped. And he said, that's the last time I bought a country album, because that's the last time the country music industry sought out my attention and sought out my dollar. Because they put Trisha Yearwood on Arsenio, and they knew Black people were watching Arsenio, and they sold records because of that. So I'll leave it there. And I know this is about our panelists, but I'm really passionate about that, because this is where the rubber meets the road. There's a lot of, look, take everything else out, take feelings out of it. There's a lot of money to be made. Whatever, there are a lot of positions and a lot of perspectives. Listen, whatever, there's a lot of money to be made too. And that's a conversation.
All right, so let me bring it back to something I asked in the beginning, which was, now what? How do we as a community take the steps to move forward from these panel discussions and create an action plan that trains us in our personal, daily, and work lives to change our country to an anti-racism, pro-people community? So how do we take this moment and turn it into a movement? How do we go today, Monday, and make the world a better place, make the Nashville music community a better place than it was last week?
Anybody want to take that?
I think this still starts going back to what we said earlier, and the speech needs to happen with the people that look like you and that talk like you and that are not saying, and the people that, I'm just using Morgan Wallen as an example, the people that were with him that did not admonish him for using that type of language. That's where it starts. It starts in your kitchen with your friends when y'all are having your wine socials. It starts when you're going to the different benefits and someone's telling the joke that they know they shouldn't be telling. That's where it starts. So as far as making a plan for that, I think the plan that you can make before you leave the house is the same plan where my mama told me, look, don't touch anything, don't pick up anything because I'm not buying you anything. You make that plan before you walk out the door. You say, look, if someone says something that is inappropriate and someone says something that is based upon hate, I have to speak up and say something. That's the plan that you have to enact, because it has to start with the individuals. This whole thing, as far as white racism and white supremacy started with the individuals, because the individuals were receiving something from this. They were receiving that economic benefit. So they were willing to buy into that product of white supremacy because they were receiving that economic benefit. So now you have to figure out what would be the benefit of someone being an anti-racist. What is the benefit of someone advocating for equality? And that's where I think people get stumped, is because they don't see a benefit. Their position is, I can absolutely isolate myself from anyone who does not look like me, and I don't have to bend toward what they need. And honestly, I think that that's what has been happening for so long in this country, is that people have become completely apathetic to what's happening because they don't have to see it every day. And I think that's what happened with George Floyd. When that man put that knee on his neck in front of everybody, and we all had to be at home because of the pandemic, what happened was that we had to face ourselves. Just like Michael Jackson said, we had to look at that man in the mirror, and we had to see that, you know what? This really isn't happening to people that look like me. And this really is a problem. So now people have absolutely started to recognize hate is still out here. Black people really weren't making up stuff about segregation and how it still is affecting us today. We really weren't making up stuff about how slavery is still affecting us today. We weren't making it up. It really was true. It is an issue, because there's no way in the world you can tell me that that would have ever happened to anyone who looked like the officer that was putting his knee on his neck. It just doesn't happen. And when we speak to that in our small groups, it escalates. It has a ripple effect, but it starts with you. You have to make that decision in your mind that when you walk out of that door, there's a certain certain protocol that you're going to follow. You're going to recognize that this is hate. You are going to speak up that this is hate, and you're going to do it out of love, because nobody is going to listen to it if you're coming and pointing your finger at them and saying, look, you did this wrong. You shouldn't have done this. It doesn't go that way. So you have to be able to speak to them and directly about what was done, not just in some overview, but you have to be willing to have that conversation. Now, I do not recommend doing that to a stranger. Let me be clear, as that is the disclaimer. I do recommend you do that to someone who is a friend or a family member who will actually receive it. But that's where it starts. It doesn't start in this big plan to everyone, because you can't reach people in that big plan that we're talking about. Now, yes, that big plan, if there is a way for us to figure out how to make this as some sort of a benefit to people, then yes, I think that's when you can move in a big plan, because that's how white supremacy began. It began because the big benefit was an economic benefit. I'm having a hard time seeing what the benefit is now as far as equality, other than us being good people. And what I'm seeing in this nation right now brings me great pause, because at this point in time, I'm concerned that that's not enough. I just am. I am concerned that us being good people isn't enough. And it isn't enough to make people change. And that's
Charlene, if you could speak to the accountability that our council persons hold, if any. Do our political leaders, community stakeholders, those individuals, do they hold any accountability in this to create the dialogue within their council districts?
I mean, sure. I mean, we all do. We all have a civic responsibility to make sure that our communities are better for everyone, to create equity in our community. So absolutely, I think it on a local level, our Metro Council persons have a responsibility to make sure that they're listening to the voices in their community. On a state level, making policies that are equitable, and then on a federal level, we have a responsibility for sure. I think that's the simple answer to that.
Sharon, let me jump in quickly. And did you have anything to add? Something we talked about is if and when something like this happens again, what are the options, or what are the ways we can deal with it in our community and our businesses?
Well, one thing I say, and this does not help you where you are, but if you do the work, if you get your house in order before something like this occurs, you're in a much stronger position. I think that people wait and they say, oh, we got to fix this now. I've been general counsel of corporation. Oh, we got to fix this now. We got this charge now. We got to clean the house now. You got to get ahead of this. And if you're fortunate enough to not be in a situation now, go ahead and get these things done. Bring in someone to have these valid conversations. It should happen, the tone from the top. I'll give you a brief story. We had a CEO once, and he actually came from Vermont. I always say that a Republican in Vermont is a Democrat every place else, because his mindset was totally different. And he was like an absent-minded professor. He had no clue what was going on. And our home company was in New York, AIG. AIG, every holiday, it was, at that time, it was Gay Rights Week or something like that. So we had a company blast that went out. And there were people here in Nashville that found this offensive. They didn't want this coming on their computer. Now, this is your work computer. But they said, I didn't want that coming on my computer. How dare they push that out to us, blah, 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 blah. So they said, we need to go to the CEO, Jim Mallon. Jim Mallon literally looked at these people that came in his office. I said, well, I'll say after me, I'll let you tell Jim Mallon what you feel. He looked at them, he says, I do not understand what you are talking about. He literally said those words. When they said, he said, I don't understand what you're talking about. It's a white man. He said, I don't understand what you're talking about. And he kept saying the same thing. I don't understand what you're talking about. And then at the end of it, he finally said, maybe this is not the company for you. And those people went back. Now they were suspect in my mind from there on out. But with that said, That was the tone from the top. And you set that tone. If the CEO of every last one of these corporations set the tone for not diverse inclusion, for anti-racism, you could change it like this. And they know what to do. They're just really afraid. You can't lead from a place of fear. But when you put that person in there that's willing to take that step, that really feels that in their heart, that's what you do. And you build that anti-racist community and you live by that mission. And trust me, you will make money if you do it right. If you are anti-racist, you will make money. But people, just like they're saying, when you put women and minorities in this position, because oftentimes I was the only one at the table that spoke for all the women, all the Black folks, all the mothers. I spoke for everybody. And I said, well, you know, when you have these meetings at 6 o'clock, some of these people got to, you know, do this, this, and this, and they got these other things. Why do we have to have this all the time? Why are we always doing this? So those people at the table will save you if you listen to them. So I'm just saying, do the work now. And so you don't have the problem down the road. So when something happens, something's always going to come up. You're always going to have, I say, litigation, discrimination, liability. Liability is the biggest word in the room that nobody wants to talk about, but liability undercurrent is economics and money. That you'll be in a better position because you have a body of work that shows I've done the best I can do. And this person acting the way they are is an outlier, and we're not going to tolerate that, but you have done the work before.
And you know what?
Well, let me jump in. You use the word fear. You know, something that was interesting last week is how few artists we heard addressing the situation. Maren Morris is always vocal on these things. A lot of times you hear more from Americana artists like, Margot Price's country. We hear from her often, Jason Isbell. Let's say we heard largely from not mainstream country artists. We heard from Sturgill Simpson, who said, you know, instead of calling me, call the people that aren't speaking and ask why we're not hearing from them. I'm not sure how many white male country singers we heard from last week. What does that say about our format? And what does it say about being an artist? I know some artists say, I don't ever want to speak out politically because I'll immediately alienate 50% of my base. Shannon, I'll turn this over to you. Was that a statement in of itself that we didn't hear from more mainstream country artists?
For a long time, it's been allowed to be the soundtrack to racism. Without even saying it, we just allowed it to be implied. We've allowed it to be implied through images and just the lack of, you know, just the lack of everywhere. When, you know, while we were talking just now, I really kept, the image that kept playing over and over in my mind was of the Quincy Jones documentary. If everybody saw that, if anybody saw it, what was amazing about that is what he said about Frank Sinatra, how Sinatra pretty much integrated Vegas single-handedly because he used the power of his platform. He leveraged his celebrity and said, you know what, nah, like, how am I gonna stay in this hotel? How are my band members good enough to play music in this hotel or in your casino, in your venue, but at the same time, they're not respected enough to stay here, but I am. And so he said, look, if they don't stay here, I don't stay, I don't play here. And that, he single-handedly integrated Vegas at that point at a contentious time when, you know, when Vegas was, you know, way more seedy than it is now in terms of the power structure there. But he used his celebrity. He used the power of his platform and leveraged that for good. And it'd be great to see that. So I think the message is clear, you know, just from what we're hearing from the artists. Honestly, and honestly, the sad part is I really don't believe in my heart that a lot of them really feel that way. I just think that they're afraid of losing their platform. I think they're afraid of being called out. I think that they're afraid of losing something, whatever that is, not being considered authentic. Maybe it's authentically Southern, what is perceived as being authentically Southern, since this is considered Southern music. But I think that it's been allowed for too long to be too much perpetuation of old Southern ideals. And it's not that anymore. you know, really more than anything, country is really more Southern pop than it is anything else.
Yeah.
You know, country at its origins with a lot of beautiful love songs, honestly, and just songs of heartbreak. It was a lot of beautiful songs, you know what I mean? And so over time, it's been allowed to be something that's been implied. And a lot of it has been through the images. So that's what I wanted to say is that these platforms are really powerful. Sometimes it's, you know, it can be what's said, but in a lot of ways it's what's not said. It's who's not in the videos, it's who's not participating. These videos aren't very inclusive, you know, a lot of it is just the images that are perpetuated that imply more than anything. A picture's worth 1,000 words. It don't matter what you say.
Yeah, and it really depends on the person's, I guess, their risk tolerance is what we would say. For instance, you know, for a long time, Michael Jordan, see, I'm old school. Michael Jordan for a long time didn't speak out on politics because he saw it as protecting his brand, but he was building up money. Now he says it more. Now, LeBron James came out of the box and he was a once in a lifetime talent. He said, well, y'all gonna take me the way I am. And so he's been there from day one. But I will say that there's just a lot of issues, and this is not, I don't want us to just bash country music because there are a lot of people that you could really look at that have their own issues. I, at one point, was very outspoken on misogyny in rap music, and I'm telling you, I call HE double hockey sticks, as I say it, over that opinion from my friends. They thought, well, why are you coming down the brothers? That's not right, etc. But I truly believe this, and I found this very harmful to images of Black women, you know, who I wanted to empower. I didn't see why they had to be an ornament in a video. So there's a lot of this, you know, and there's an overlapping between misogyny and white privilege and all these things. They all mix together in this toxic environment. That's why I always say, let's go back in the spirit of trying to make this the best community it can be and have the difficult conversations, but make this so that we can come and say, you know, I hate that someone says, you know, they're afraid, because fear is a bad motivator. That's when you make the worst decisions, when you're afraid. When you're afraid, that's when things go off the rails. That's when executives get afraid they're going to lose for the quarter earnings. So they start making a decision. Next thing you know, they lose more than they could have ever lost in a quarter. So fear is not a very good emotion. And when you mix fear of losing money, it's just a bad situation.
Well, that's a good segue to the chat box. We have a question here. As the only Black person on an all-white team, how do I speak up for myself without always being accused of being angry or not happy? For example, pay, workload, microaggressions. What can the industry do better to make sure everyone feels accepted from within? And that's for anybody on the panel.
Ooh, I've been there. I've been the only Black person on an all-white staff. It doesn't feel good. I don't know if I have a solution for that other than to stand your ground and to speak up. That's ultimately what I had to do when I was in that environment. I was doing the work of four jobs and was begging for an assistant or someone to help in my department. And the minute I left, they hired somebody to help this person. They hired a white male and then hired the help that I was asking for. But what ended up happening was I ultimately had to say, no, I'm not doing any more work of anyone else, and literally told them, no, I'm not doing it. In a week, you know, about a month later, I ended up quitting. So if it's just not the environment, it's just not the environment for you. I don't know if I have, sometimes that action is the action to wake them up, to say, oh, well, maybe we aren't doing something right, to where our only person of color in the organization feels like they're not welcome and has to leave. So I don't know. Speaking up is the best thing you can do.
I would
would
also
say that I always try to move people back to the mission. I said, look, do you want this to happen? Read that mission statement. We are here for this purpose, and I'm doing all I can to move us toward this mission moving forward. We need all of us working together. And I'm going to need you to work with me because I'm doing all I can to move this mission forward. And most people, when you put that mission statement out there, it blows their minds because they can't fight that. That's something that's been agreed to. They work for hours and spend all kinds of money to shape that mission statement. I told a man that was head of a hospital this, and it blew his mind. Next thing you know, he realized he did have some issues because people within his community were not living by that mission statement.
There's
Cameo, did you want to, I know you had your camera on a minute ago and had your hand raised. Did you want to say something or ask a
Well,
new
just
question?
to Sharon's point and some of the things that we were talking about, Jonathan Levine, who runs the Paradigm Agency in Nashville, and I have been chatting and texting since our audience isn't able to speak up, and just, you know, and our chat box, of course, blowing up, that ultimately it does come down to money and how we have the conversations with the gatekeepers, so that we don't have these white male artists afraid to speak up because it's attached to their money, right? Even Garth Brooks going and performing for the inauguration and saying it's not political. It's like, you actually have a moment in time to say something right, and you don't take advantage of that. The Confederate flags and videos that we let go because it's a huge artist, or all of these things that are going on, you know, the fear in this industry is tied to the economics. And until we find a way to separate that, and we do all speak up on every instance that we can, we're not going to get to a place where we have enough of those mainstream white male artists backing up. And then we have all of the people of color and women doing the work to educate a bunch of ignorant white people on what it is that we need to be doing better.
Well, we have another question that we have artists of color like Mickey Guyton, Kane Brown, Jimmy Allen are hot in country now. I believe we have 5 songs on the charts right now featuring artists of color. Do you think this represents a shift in the industry?
Well, it all depends. I mean, it should be that they should not be the black country artists. They should be the good country artists. But, you know, he has little baby steps because, you know, Charlie Pride, I mean, he was around a long time ago. Lionel Richie did a country song. People have been doing country music. And it's just a matter of, you know, it should be the music, you know, and see how the music, you know, I think it should stand on its own merits. And I think that you should not bring up obstacles, because there's a lot of business to this. There's a lot of subjectivity. What is someone going to play, you know, on the radio? How are you going to stream it? What kind of contract do they have? There's all sorts of things that have a negative effect on a very good artist being able to get the benefit of their artistry within any kind of music, and probably more specifically country music.
I was going to say it'll be a shift if it's not looked at as checking a box. You know what I mean? I think there's that, we have to be careful of that. It's like, oh, now we have a person of color on our roster, box check. It has to be some real work. I mean, Mickey Guyton's been around forever. There's no reason, she's great. I'd like to see her, but I think to your point, not because she's a black artist, she's just a great artist. But I do fear that there's a little bit of box checking, you know, that we all have. And so we have to make sure that this is not just that. And I keep saying that moment, that it's a real effort on just signing great artists and knowing, as Shannon said, that there's an audience out there.
Well, and also if you look at how the country music industry has responded to other artists like Lil Nas X or Beyonce, they're quick to say that's not a country song, instead of the big tent philosophy where please come into our fold. So, you know, it's absurd if you think about it, that it's 2021 and we have so few artists of color. It's absurd. So do we anticipate that, you know, let's fast forward, where will we be in 10 years? Will we be having this conversation? Will it just be considered a country singer as opposed to a country singer of color?
Well, one of the interesting things too is, like, as we progress, and as genre lines become more skewed, you know, we don't need to miss a very meaningful and powerful and potentially beautiful moment here musically, because there's a lot that can happen. There's a lot of collaboration that happens. Artists are doing a lot. Artists are trying to get together. You know, how much of this is industry led? A lot of this is not led by creativity. You know, and I've said it on one of our calls before. There's usually no racism in the locker room. You know, that usually works itself out. If you play sports, yo, when you on a team with somebody, at some point that trumps that. And it's the same thing, not to, okay, I didn't mean to say it that way, but you know what I mean. That used to mean something. Anyway, but it's just bigger than that. You know, in the locker room, whatever your biases are, you just transcend. And the same is true in the studio. I can tell you how many times I'm in the studio and you just don't, it just doesn't matter there. You know, so who are the shot callers? It was never a creative's idea to distinguish between hillbilly records and race records and distinguish genre. You know, had we never done that, we probably just have American music, you know, and all the different flavors of that, you know, but so it's never a creative's idea. So we really have to look at the business and dismantle it from there for real. Because, and at the same time, we really have to look at ourselves, because how long will we allow certain things to be said? How long will we allow certain songs to prevail? Like, stop, just stop playing. Stop recording my song. Stop approving labels. Stop approving the budget for that. Like, no, if that's the perpetuation of hate, look, you know, and I mean, and listen, this goes both ways. Let's be real. I mean, you know, even in hip hop, we struggle with this, you know, with the perpetuation of violence in the community and in the music, you know, to Sharon's point, misogyny, like, yo, certain things that don't need to exist in the music across the board, like in any genre, you know what I mean? And so where misogyny may be, or crime may be the prevailing overtone in certain forms of rap music that happen to be more popular right now, the same could be said with country music and racism and just what happens to be popular. So, you know, at some point we have to take it upon ourselves as an industry and change the narrative, come together as executives and say, you know what, no more. Let us set the tone and just let artists know and creators know this is not what we want, because we realize, bottom line, we realize that the music that we put out affects our culture positively or negatively, and we have to take some responsibility for that.
And to that point, you know, we have some incredible organizations here that are on this panel that are on the ground in the trenches fighting the systemic issues that cause all of this, right? I've seen Charlene in the summer, you know, trying to drum up voter registration. We know the wonderful work of the NAACP and YWCA. So let me flip the tables quickly. I know we are in Music City. So our panelists, what do you need from the music community to help support your missions that help cure some of these issues and challenges that we talk about over and over and over again? What do you need from this billion-dollar industry that's in your backyard, where some of you, I've seen it, you've taken shoestring budgets and you created miracles. I've seen it.
Preach.
I follow you on Instagram. So what do you need from the music community to support your missions so that, to Bev's point, we're not talking about this 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We've actually created some value, some change. What do you want to see more from the music community to support your organizations?
Well, I'll jump in. I say that, you know, most importantly, we need partnership, true partnership from the top all the way down, doing the work that we do with youth in schools. You know, it means the world when they see individuals who they look up to, who are behind the music that they listen to, coming in and talking about manhood in terms of respect, right? And how we treat each other. You can't put a price tag on that. Right. And so to the extent that we can have some mutually beneficial partnerships where we also get an opportunity to come in and provide some training, to provide some awareness, some education around these issues, I think is really, really important. Obviously, where there's no money, there's no mission. And so there's obviously always an opportunity there to be able to give, but there's some mutually beneficial ways for us to partner in ways that can really move the needle in communities in some positive ways.
Well, I was going to say for the NAACP, one thing that I am very concerned about is how do we trust who to partner with? I'm very concerned about that. I don't want corporations or celebrities to use the NAACP as a white flag that says, look, we're not racist because we're here. Okay. I do not want that. And so that makes me hesitate and say that what I want to do is to see you doing it in your arena. Coming and talking to people that I have access to isn't going to change what we need changed. That's not going to eradicate hate. But talking to people that I don't have access to and expressing to them what needs to be done to eradicate hate. That's what I need to see. I need to see that you have a plan, that you are willing to have those difficult conversations about how to eradicate hate in your circles, that when I speak, they don't listen. I need you to be that voice there to say that this is how this needs to be done, which means first, that means that you have to understand that there is a problem and you have to want to find that solution. And you have to make that plan and you have to be willing to address it when you see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need both and. We need, the BMIs of the world who will, drop $1 million to organizations who are working on the ground doing this work. But that's not enough to just throw your money at the problem. We're tired. Like, we are tired of doing this ourselves. We definitely need resources to sustain our work, but we also need, like, the Sturgill Simpsons of the world, who are going to speak to their audiences, who has that platform, who can leverage their platform to reach audiences we don't have access to and speak truth to power. But we also need the industry as a whole organizing themselves and using and leveraging their business voice. I don't see enough of the business community speaking up to this racist state legislature that we have, who is passing laws every single day that is oppressing families in this state, defunding education, that is criminalizing voter registration. Like, it's not enough to just lobby Congress to get your music royalties and your streams, more cents on the dollar. Like, we need y'all speaking up against injustices that are happening right here in Tennessee. So where is that happening? I need you to speak up against voting rights restoration, where there are over 425,000 people in this state who cannot vote because of voter suppression, who have earned the right to vote back. But unfortunately, they can't, because of the hurdles that are in this state. And some of those same folks, let's be real, in hip hop culture, a lot of them have criminal records and can't vote. But y'all are profiting off of their talent. So you do have a stake in this as industry folks as well, to the issues that we're fighting. So I would say that yes, contribute, speak up, but also organize in the business industry, because Governor Lee listens to the business community. Let's be real. He listens to you more than he'll listen to me. And so look what happened with the LGBTQ community when they spoke up and said, we won't tolerate these slate of hate bills that you're passing. And look what happened. They didn't pass them. So your voice as a business community speaks volumes, pun intended. So we don't need allies. We need co-conspirators. We need people who are going to be in the trenches with us, who are willing to get into some good trouble and are okay with sacrificing just a little bit. Maybe your bottom line won't be just as much as it was last year, but you're still making money.
Well, on that note, our panel time has come to a close. So I want to thank our panelists, and especially thank you to Brian Sexton who is a board member of NME. And I have been reminded to announce the next Nashville Music Equality Panel will be on February 23rd with the Black Country Music Association. So I want to thank all of our panelists for an unforgettable night. You have given us plenty to think about. There's been lots of note taking, and you know, we all hope that this is the beginning of real change in the Nashville music community. And thank everybody for their time, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are.